Registry APIs?
Hi guys, good morning. Welcome back to day 3 for microservices project development. So already we completed 2 sessions. Those videos also available in our YouTube channel. Notes also I have shared. So in the last sessions, what we discussed? In the last sessions, we discussed about how many ways we can develop a software application. What is monolithic architecture? What is microservices architecture? Monolithic architecture, nothing but if we develop all the functionalities in the single application, then it is called as monolithic architecture. So all the layers like presentation layer, business layer, database layer, UI, everything will be available in one project and it will communicate with one database. That is called monolithic architecture. When you go for monolithic architecture, there are several drawbacks available like tightly coupling, maintenance, redeploying the entire project, technology dependent, burden will be increased on the server, single point of failure. Like this, there are several drawbacks available with the monolithic architecture. To overcome those problems of monolithic, we are going for microservices architecture, guys. Microservices is an architectural design pattern in order to develop our application. So instead of developing all the functionalities in the single application, we will divide the functionalities into multiple services. Like this, multiple services will be created. Every service is responsible for one functionality. When you go for microservices architecture, these are the advantages we are having. Loosely coupling, burden will be reduced on the server, easy maintenance will be available, no single point of failure, technology independent, and quickly we can develop and deliver our application to the client. These are the advantages available with the microservices architecture. Along with the advantages, there are some challenges also available with the microservices. One is bounded context, and the second one is repeated configuration we need to do for the microservices development, and visibility problem. You may not get the chance to work with all the microservices available in the application. The next one, coming to the architecture of the microservices, there is no fixed architecture for the microservices. People are going to customize this architecture according to their project requirement. Okay, so in the microservices architecture, generally these components will be used. Okay, service registry will be available, admin server will be available, Zipkin server will be available, config server will be available, Kafka, Redis, database, and multiple APIs development. Nothing but REST APIs we are going to develop. And those REST APIs can communicate with the other REST API by using Feign client. Okay, and we are going to have API gateway. API gateway is acting as a front gate to verify whether the request is valid request or not. Okay, so when you go for microservices development, this kind of architecture we can see, but it is not fixed architecture. It is not mandatory to follow this architecture. Some people may not use API gateway, some people may not use Redis, some people may not use Feign client, some people may not use config server. So it depends on the project requirement. It depends on the project requirement. Okay. It depends on the project requirement. People are going to customize this architecture according to their requirement. Now, what is the role of service registry? Service registry is used to maintain all the APIs information at one place. Okay, what all the microservices available and what is the name of that? What is the URL of that? What is the status of that? All those microservices we can access one place by using service registry. So we are using Eureka server as a service registry. And the next one, admin server is available. Admin server is used to monitor and manage all the APIs at one place. Admin server is used to monitor and manage all the APIs at one place. All the APIs actuators we can access at one place by using this admin server. Next one, Zipkin server is available. It is used for distributed tracing of our request. It will provide interface to access API's execution details. And the next one, config server is available. Config server is used to separate application code and application properties. So instead of loading the properties from the application, we will load them from outside by using config server concept. And the next one, Feign client. So what is the purpose of Feign client? Feign client is used for microservices communication. So one API want to communicate with the another API, then we are going to use Feign client. The advantage with the Feign client, it will use the service name in order to communicate with the other services. Kafka is used for distributed streaming. Redis is a cache platform. And API gateway is available in the application. API gateway is acting as an entry point for all the backend APIs. So any request which is coming to our application, first that request will come to API gateway, and API gateway will act as a mediator between front-end application and back-end applications. In API gateway, we will write the filters and routings. What is the purpose of filters? Filters are used to perform pre-processing and post-processing of the request. Routings are used to forward the request to particular backend API. So these things we have developed in the last session. The development guide also I have given. How to create a Eureka application, how to create admin server, and how to start a Zipkin project by using Zipkin jar file, and creating one welcome API, and creating greet API, and how to establish inter-service communication for the greet API and welcome API by using Feign client. That concept also we have implemented. So are you guys able to develop this project on your own? Are you guys able to develop this project? Whatever that we have done in the previous session, are you able to develop that one? Yes. How many of you able to complete that? So what are the APIs we completed as of now? So we completed service registry project creation, service registry application we have created, which is Eureka server. And the next one, admin server project also we created, which is used to monitor and manage the APIs. And the third one, we have created Zipkin server. We started the Zipkin server, which is used for distributed tracing of our application. And the fourth one, we have created one welcome API. This is our microservice. And we created one more application, which is greet API. And we established inter-service communication among the services by using Feign client. Inter-service communication we established by using Feign client. So these are the 6 topics that we have already completed in the Sunday session. So yesterday there was no class. Today is our day 3. So today we are going to understand what is load balancing and why we need to go for load balancing, and how to work with load balancing in the microservices. And we are going to understand what is API gateway and how to work with the API gateway. Is this clear for all of you? Guys, I'm getting one call, so we'll be back in 2 minutes, guys. So guys, in the previous class, we completed service registry application development. We completed admin server application, and we completed Zipkin server also. We completed welcome API development. We completed greet API development, and we also completed inter-service communication among those APIs by using Feign client concept. Okay, so today we are going to understand what is load balancing and why we need to work with the load balancing, and how to set up the load balancing in our microservices. So can anyone tell me what is the load balancing? Any idea on the load balancing concept, guys?
One microservice running in different servers.
So what is the main purpose of load balancing, and why we need to go for the load balancing?
Distributing the load to the different servers.
Move the request to the target server.
Okay, load balancing is basically used to distribute the load to multiple servers. For example, if you are having application that is running in one server, assume that this is our microservice. This microservice is running in one server. Okay, assume that this is a server. Inside this server, our application is running. So when the application is running inside the server, so many people are going to send a request to that application, and they are going to access our application. Assume that this is our application which is running inside one server. Now, when it is running in one server, so many requests are coming to our application. So all the requests are going to single server. Then the burden will be increased on the server. The burden will be increased on the server. So what are the problems available? Single server is running our application. When the single server is running our application, burden will be increased on the load. Burden will be increased. Burden on server. And another problem, server can crash and response delay for the customers. These all are the challenges available when we are running our microservice in the single server. So you have one application, that application you are running in the server, that server is responsible to handle the load. So as there is only one server, all the customer requests will come to single server. As the customer requests are coming to single server, the burden will be increased on the server. When the burden is increased on the server can crash and customers will get the responses with late. Response delay will happen when you run our application in one server. So in the real time, we are not going to follow this approach because it is not recommended. Because multiple customers will be available in order to access our application. That's why in the real time, what we are going to do. In the real time, our application will be deployed into multiple servers, guys. Instead of running our application in one server, our application will be deployed into multiple servers in the real time. That is called load balancing. This is one application. This application will be deployed into one server. Same application will be deployed into one more server. Same application will be deployed into one more server. So all these servers are running the same application. So what is the benefit if we are running all these applications with multiple servers? The advantage is one load balancer will be available for our application. And all the servers will be registered with the load balancer. Customers are going to send a request to the load balancer. Then load balancer is going to distribute the request to all the servers which are running our application in the round robin fashion. First request will go to first server, second request will go to second server, third request will go to third server. Again, fourth request will go to first server, fifth request will go to second server, sixth request will go to third server. Like this, all the requests will be distributed. When we are going for the load balancing concept. So what is the benefit of load balancer? It is used to distribute the request to multiple servers. Instead of running our application in one server, we are going to run our application in multiple servers. Instead of running our application in one server, we are going to run our application in multiple servers, guys. Are you able to follow me? Here only one server is running our application. Here multiple servers are running our application. So if you run application in one server, burden will be increased on the server, load will be increased on the server, then server can crash. So to overcome that problem, instead of running our application in one server, we are going to run our application in multiple servers. So when you run the application in the multiple servers, the load will be distributed. And responses will be quick to the customers. Customers will get the responses very quickly. Application performance also will be faster. Okay. So what is load balancing? If we run our application in one server, then burden will be increased on that server. If we run our application in one server, then burden will be increased on the server. Okay, so what are the challenges available? Single server to handle all the requests. Single server should handle all the load. Single server should handle all the load. Burden on the server. Response delay to the customers. Okay, and the servers can crash. Server can crash. Single point of failure. If a server is crashed, then the entire application is going to be down. So this is single point of failure. So only one server is available in order to run that application. If the server is crashed due to some problem, due to burden, if the server is crashed, then the whole application will be down. So to overcome this problem, we are going to run our application with multiple servers. To overcome the above problems, we will run our application in multiple servers. We will run our application in multiple servers so that we can distribute the request to multiple servers. Instead of running our application in the single server, we are going to run our application in the multiple servers. Okay, so load balancer is used to distribute the request to multiple servers. Load balancer is used to distribute requests. Whatever the requests are coming, distribute requests to multiple servers. Okay, so what are the advantages when you run the application with multiple servers? Less burden on servers. Okay, quick responses to clients. No single point of failure. That means if one server is failed, no problem. The remaining servers are going to handle that load. If one server is failed, no problem. Our application is running in the remaining two servers. So if first server is failed, second server will provide the response to the customer. Third server can provide the response to the customer. So instead of running our application in one server, we are going to run our application in multiple servers by using round robin technique. So that's where we are going to implement load balancing concept. So if we run our application in one server, then burden will be increased on that server. So single server should handle all the load. Burden will be increased on the server. Server responses will be delayed to the customer. There is a chance of server crash also. And if the server is damaged, the whole application will be down. That concept is single point of failure. So to overcome all the above problems, we will run our application in multiple servers so that we can distribute the request to multiple servers. So here, load balancer is used to distribute the request to multiple servers. We have below advantages with the load balancer. What are those advantages? Less burden will be there on the servers and the responses will be quick to the customers and no single point of failure. If one server is failed, the remaining servers are going to handle that load. Okay, good. Now here, I'm going to welcome API. In the welcome API, I'm going to make some code changes and I will show you load balancing practically. So in the welcome API, I'm making some code changes and I will show you this load balancing is working as expected or not. So I'm injecting one object in the welcome REST controller, which is private environment object I am injecting. Okay, Spring Core environment bean I'm injecting here. Let me import Spring Framework Core environment bean I have injected. For injecting that environment object, I'm using one annotation called auto-avoid annotation. We already know what is the purpose of auto-avoiding. Auto-wiring is used to perform dependency injection. Auto-wide annotation we are using to perform dependency injection. Okay. Next, let me get the port number in which server our welcome API is running. Environment dot get property. Environment dot get property. So I'm going to get the property that is server dot port. On which port number our server is running, I want to get that port number and I will send that port number in the response. Okay, port. Okay, welcome to Ashok IT. So here I'm going to display the server port number. On which port number this server is running. Okay, so we are getting the response from the which server. Yesterday, when we developed this application, we have deployed welcome REST API only in one server. So if you see our diagram, welcome REST API, I have deployed in only one server. So today I'm going to deploy welcome REST API in multiple servers for the load balancing. So in our application, what is happening, guys? So here there is a greet API is available. Here there is a greet API is available. This greet API is communicating with the welcome API. Greet API is communicating with the welcome API by using Feign client. So today what I am going to do is this welcome API I'm going to run in multiple servers. Those are called as instances. Instead of running the welcome API in one server, I'm going to run the welcome API in multiple servers in order to achieve load balancing. So 3 servers I'm going to use. I will run the welcome API in 3 servers to achieve load balancing. 3 servers, nothing but for the welcome API, 3 instances will be available. 3 instances, nothing but same application I'm going to run in 3 servers with 3 different port numbers. Okay, first server will run on the port number 8081. Second server will run on the port number 8082. Third server will run on the port number 8083. So like this, welcome API, I'm going to run in 3 servers. 3 instances will be available for the welcome API. So from when it is running in the 3 servers, when the greet API send a request by using Feign client, from which server it is providing the response. For that, I am injecting environment object. Environment.get property, server port number I am getting, that server port number I'm sending in the response. So by looking at the port number, you can understand out of these 3 servers, which server is providing the response to us. Are you guys able to understand why I am using environment object in the welcome REST controller? Yes, in the last Sunday, welcome REST API, I have deployed in only one server. There was only one instance for the welcome REST API. But today, I'm going to run the welcome REST API in 3 servers. Nothing but 3 instances will be available for the welcome REST API. Why I am deploying welcome REST API in 3 instances? For load balancing. Instead of sending the request to the single server, you can send the request to multiple servers. Same application running in the multiple servers, which is called load balancing. One server is called one instance. Welcome REST API, I will run in 3 instances, 3 servers. Okay, first server will run on port number 8081. Second server will run on the port number 8082. Third server will run on the port number 8083. So in which server it is executing? When the greet API communicating with welcome API by using Feign client. Feign client is communicating with the first server. Feign client communicating with the second server or third server. So from which server we are getting the response? Welcome API is responding from which server? To understand that, I have injected environment object in the welcome REST API. And from that, I am getting the port number. That port number I'm sending in the response. If you get the port number as 8081, that means first server giving the response. If you get from 8082, second server responding. 8083 means third server responding. Now, so I want to use different port numbers for different servers. That's why I'm removing the fixed port number from the welcome REST API. So I have fixed the port number as 8081. So if you fix the port number as 8081, always it will try to start on the 8081. Only one server we can start. So I want to run this application in 3 servers for load balancing. So remove the port number from the YML file and pass that port number in the runtime. I'm removing port number from the application.yml. That's it. Okay, guys. So in the REST controller, I have done one change. I injected environment object. Using environment object, I'm getting the port number. And the second change I have done, from the YML file, remove the port number so that we can pass the port number in the runtime. Okay, very good. So these are the 2 changes I have done to implement the load balancing. Go to service registry, run this application, right click, run as boot application. My Eureka server is getting started, which will run on the port number 8761. Eureka server will run on the port number 8761. Clear this. Go and access Eureka dashboard. Localhost colon 8761. Localhost colon 8761. Yes, I'm able to access my Eureka dashboard. So in the Eureka dashboard, currently no instances are available. Nothing but no applications are registered with the Eureka as of now. And let's go and start the admin server also. Run as boot application. Admin server is used to monitor and manage our applications. Admin server will run on the port number 1111 as per our configuration. Admin server will run on the port number 1111 as per our configuration. Okay. Go to the browser and let us try to access that also. Localhost colon 1111. Admin server dashboard we are accessing. Currently, no applications registered with the admin server. Now Zipkin server. Zipkin server is available as a jar file. So we need to run the Zipkin server from the jar files. Okay. Zipkin jar we are downloading from the internet, and that jar we will run by using command prompt. Okay. Let me run that Zipkin jar file in the command prompt. Okay, this is my command prompt. Here my Zipkin jar is available. Java space -jar space Zipkin jar file. I'm trying to start. So this jar we downloaded from the internet. So when you run this Zipkin jar file, Zipkin server will start. Zipkin server will run on the port number 9411. So we can access Zipkin dashboard also in the browser. Localhost colon 9411. Yes, Zipkin jar file started, Zipkin server started, but currently we don't have any output in the Zipkin server. Traces are not available in the Zipkin server. Okay, next let us start our microservices, guys. So yesterday we directly started welcome service. We configured port number as 8081. Today I removed that port number here. Now observe carefully. Currently in the Eureka server, no application is available. No instance is available in our Eureka server. So how I am going to start this Eureka server? It is already started. Now welcome service. So welcome service name is available. Admin server URL is available. Actuators are enabled. Port number is not available. Why I am not configuring the port number? If I configure the port number, always it will try to start with the same port number. I don't want to run only in one server. I want to run the welcome API in multiple servers. So every server should use different port number. So that's why right click on the welcome service, run as run configurations. I want to run welcome API with different port numbers. 3 times I will run with 3 different port numbers. That is called 3 instances. So how to start this welcome API? Right click on the welcome service, run as, run configurations. So when you go for run configurations, there will be an option. You can select the application that you have. Spring Boot application, welcome service application is available. So whenever you go to application, right click, run as, run configurations. This is important step for load balancing, guys. Run as, run configurations. So in this run configurations, you select for which application you want to supply the port number. Go to Spring Boot applications, welcome service application is available. Go to arguments, VM arguments option, -d server dot port is equal to 8081. So I am passing port number to the server dynamically. Okay. So first time I am running with 8081. Second time I will run with 8082. Third time I will run with 8083. So -d server dot port is equal to 8081. Here -d nothing but it is a system argument that we are passing to the JVM. Right. So I am telling to this welcome API, you start the server with 8081 port number, apply and run. So with this, welcome service is running in one embedded server with the port number 8081. Now you go to Eureka dashboard and you can check that. What are the instances currently registered with the Eureka server? And so here if you observe the Eureka dashboard, welcome service is running. It is running up and running up is the status of welcome API. Number one is displaying, that means instances. In how many servers your welcome API is running? Welcome API is running in one server, and this is the URL of that server. This is the URL of the API. The port number is 8081. Now I want to run this welcome API in one more server with the port number 8082. How to do that? Right click on this one, run as, run configurations. Right click on this one, run as, run configurations. Go to welcome service, arguments, this time 8082, apply and run. So I am running welcome API, one more server. That means 2 times I am running the same application. So two servers are running. Same application we are running in 2 servers for load balancing. So 2 instances available for the welcome API. We are having 2 instances for the welcome API. Are you clear with my point? 2 instances available for the welcome API. Okay. 2 instances available for the welcome API, guys. Now let me go to the Eureka dashboard and let me check it. Now earlier there was only 1 instance available. Now 2 instances available for the welcome API. So 2 URLs also available. Welcome service 8081 is available. Welcome service 8082 available. Similarly, we can run one more instance also. How? Right click, run as, run configuration, select welcome service, select the arguments here, server port number 8083. Third server I am trying to start. Click on apply, click on run. It is getting started. Now go to Eureka dashboard and see how many instances available for the welcome service. Currently 2 instances available. It should be updated to 3. I started 3rd instance also with a 8083 port number. I'm waiting for that. 3rd instance I have started for the welcome service. Now, can you see how many instances available for the welcome service, guys? Can you see how many instances available for the welcome service now? Can you see how many instances available for the welcome service now?
3 instances.
So there are 3 instances available for welcome service. There are 3 instances available for the welcome service. So 3 instances are running with the same port number. 3 instances are running with the different port number.
Different port number.
Different port number.
How I started same application with the different port numbers. So I removed the port number from the YML file. If you configure port number in the YML file, you can run it only one time. If you try to start second time, it will say port already in use. So that is the reason I removed the port number from the YML file. And how I supplied that port number, right click on the project, run as, run configurations, and here select your Spring Boot application here in the left side menu, select your boot application and give the arguments. -d server.port is equal to what is the port number. First time I used 8081, second time I used 8082, third time I used 8083. So with this, I can say that my welcome API is running in 3 servers. That means 3 instances available for the welcome service. Okay. In the admin dashboard also you can see welcome service having 3 instances. What is the meaning of 3 instances? 8081, 8082, 8083. Same application we are running in 3 servers. So why we need to run same application in 3 servers, guys? What is the need of that? Why we are running same application in 3 servers? What is the need of that?
Distributing the load.
Yes. So instead of sending the request to the single server, we are sending the request to 3 different servers here. Okay. So instead of sending the request to the single server, we are sending the request to 3 different servers here. Now, let me start my Greet API. So Greet API, I'm going to run only in one server, that is 9091 port number. In the Greet API, there is a Feign client is available. What is the role of the Feign client here, guys? What is the role of the Feign client?
Intercommunication.
Service communication.
Should communicate from the Greet API to welcome API. Feign client is available in the Greet API. So when I send the request to the Greet API, it should communicate with the welcome API by using Feign client. So Feign client is communicating with the URL of the API with the name of the API.
The URL. Name of the API.
Name of the API.
Name of the
Name of the API, sir.
Name of the API.
Communicating with the URL of the API or with the name of the API.
Name of the
API.
Name of the API.
Name of the API.
Why not URL? Why we are using name of the service? Why we are not using URL of the service?
Maybe change in future.
URL may be changed in the future, sir,
Yes.
for
URLs
individual
can change
application.
in the future, and there are 3 URLs available for the welcome API. Okay. So if you want to communicate with the URL, out of 3 URLs, which URL you will use? And today 3 URLs available. Tomorrow it can become 5 also. It can become 10 also. It can become 2 also. So can we depend on the URLs for the communication now? No, because
Yes, sir.
URLs can change in the future. URLs can be increased. URLs can be decreased. That means for the welcome API, number of instances can be increased. Number of instances can be decreased also. That is the reason we should not use the URL for the communication. If you go for REST template and web client, you need to use the URL for the communication. Whereas if you go for the Feign client, you can use, you can use name of the service for the communication. Now you see here, Greet REST controller is available. Greet REST controller is available. So when we are sending the request to the Greet REST controller, it is calling welcome client.welcome message. What is the meaning of welcome client.welcome message? You go and talk to welcome service. You send a get request /welcome get request to welcome service. Feign client is having the name of the service. Feign client don't know URL of the service. Who will maintain service name and service URLs in the microservices, guys? Who
Service registry.
Service name and service URLs in the microservices? Come on.
Service
Eureka server.
Service URL. Come on. Who is going to maintain that? Service URL and service name in this scenario?
Service discovery.
Yes, service discovery is going to maintain that service name and service URL. So whenever we are saying to the Feign client to communicate with the API, then here that Feign client is going to communicate with the service registry in order to identify the URLs of the API. It is going to communicate with the service registry in order to identify the URLs of the API. So there is only one URL available, or there are multiple URLs available for the welcome API. One URL is available, or multiple URLs available for the welcome API.
Multiple URLs.
Multiple URLs available for the welcome API. That's where load balancing comes into picture. So here, whenever Feign client is going to communicate with the service discovery will tell that, boss. So here I am sending a request to the greet API. I'm sending a request to the greet API. Greet API is communicating with the Feign client. Feign client is having the name of the service to get the URLs. Then Feign client will go and talk to service registry of our application. So Feign client will tell to service registry, hey, service discovery, I want to communicate with the welcome service. Could you please give me the URLs of the welcome service? So how many URLs available for the welcome service? One URL is available. Multiple URLs available for the welcome service, guys?
Multiple URLs.
One URL is available, or multiple URLs available for the welcome service?
Multiple URLs.
URLs available for the welcome service. Multiple URLs available for the welcome service, then it is a confusion for the Feign client. So there are multiple URLs available. We should communicate with the which URL now. There are multiple URLs available. We should communicate with the which URL now. That's guys, are you understanding my point?
Yes, sir.
Are you understanding my point?
Yes, sir.
So what is the confusion for the Feign client here?
There are multiple servers available.
URLs. On which server it is going to run?
Yes, so it should communicate with the which server, because so greet API is going to communicate with the welcome API. Greet API is not communicating with the welcome API directly. Greet API is using Feign client. Feign client should communicate with the welcome API. Feign client don't know URL of the welcome API. Feign client don't know the URL of the welcome API. Feign client knows only name of the service. Then here, Feign client should communicate with the Eureka server in order to identify what is the URL of the welcome API. So for the welcome API, it's not one URL. For the welcome API, there are 3 URLs available. So out of these 3 URLs, which URL it should use for communication? Out of these 3 URLs, which URL it should use for the communication? That is a confusion for the Feign client. So that's why what this Feign client is going to do, first Feign client is going to communicate with the service registry. Feign client is going to communicate with the service registry. So in our application, we are using Eureka as a service registry. So it will give the URLs of the welcome service. For the welcome service, there are 3 URLs available. Now, with which URL it should communicate? So it is a confusion for the Feign client. That's why inside the Feign client, there is a concept called ribbon concept is available. There is a concept called ribbon concept is available. Feign client is going to communicate with the ribbon for the load balancing. So what is the role of the ribbon? We no need to configure the ribbon manually. The ribbon is already part of the Feign client. That ribbon will take a decision for which server we need to send the request. For which server we need to send the request, that decision will be taken care by ribbon. So Feign client, we are going to send a request to the greet API. Greet API will use Feign client. Feign client is having the name of the service. So with this service name, Feign client will communicate with the service registry. Hey, service registry, I want to access welcome API. Can you give me URLs of the welcome API? If there is only one URL, then no problem. Directly it can communicate with that service by using service URL. But in our scenario, welcome API is not having single URL. Welcome API is having multiple URLs. Welcome API is having multiple URLs. Okay, so when there are multiple URLs available, how it is going to communicate with those URLs? It is a confusion for the Feign client. So then what Feign client is going to do? That Feign client is going to communicate with the ribbon. So what is the role of the ribbon? Ribbon is going to provide the load balancing. Ribbon will tell to the Feign client, hey, send the first request to first server, send the second request to second server, send the third request to third server. Like this, Feign client is going to talk to the ribbon. Ribbon is going to implement the load balancing here. Now, how do you understand the request is going to first server or second server or third server? That's why what I have done in the welcome REST controller, I am sending port number also in the response. So first server running on 8081, second server running on 8082, third server running on 8083. So from which server we are getting the response, that we can see that port number also in the response. Okay. Now, so let me start the Greet API now. Greet API having a Feign client, run as boot application. Greet API will run on the port number 9091. Welcome API running in 3 instances, 3 servers available for the welcome API, 3 instances available for the welcome API, 8081, 8082, 8083. Now I am starting Greet API. Now I am starting the Greet API, which will run on the port number 9091. Now can you see in the Eureka dashboard what all the APIs available and what is the name of the API? How many instances available for the API and what is the URL of the API? Are you guys able to understand?
Yes, sir.
Are you guys able to understand what is the name of the API? How many instances available for the API? How many instances available for the API? What are the URLs? What is the status? What is the name? What is the URL? So everything that we can see in the Eureka dashboard. Everything we can see in the Eureka dashboard. Now, can you tell me what is the purpose of Eureka? Now, guys, can you tell me what is the purpose of Eureka?
Discovery of the services or register of the service.
It is going to register all our microservices and it will provide the service details based on the service name. Okay, now I want to send the request to Greet API. So what will happen if I send the request to Greet API now, guys? What will happen if I send the request to Greet API now? Greet API will give only greet message, or Greet API will communicate with the welcome API and will provide the welcome response also.
It combines the greet and welcome
API.
Greet API will provide only greet response and it will provide the welcome API combined response for us.
Combined
response.
Now, I'm going to send the request to the Greet API. Look at this one, localhost colon 9091 / greeter. 9091 / greeter. So I'm sending the request to the Greet API. What happened now, guys? Which server responded for the welcome API REST request?
8082.
8082 server responded. Now refresh this. Now which server is responding?
8081.
Now check it, which server is responding?
8083.
So can we say the load balancing is working now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So now every request is going to the same server, or the requests are distributed to multiple servers now?
Distributed to multiple servers.
Who will be distributing the request to multiple servers here? Ribbon. Who is using that ribbon?
Feign client.
Now you understand how one service can communicate with the another service. So we have 3 options, guys. If one application wants to, if one microservice wants to communicate with the another microservice, there are three options available. What are those three options we are having, guys? One is template option is available, and the second one is
Web client.
web client option is available, and the third one is Feign
Feign
client
client.
option is also available. So when you use REST template now, you need to configure the URL of the API for communication. If you go for web client also, you need to specify the URL of the API for communication. When you go for Feign client, what is the advantage, guys? Load balance also will work. You no need to specify the URL of the API. You no need to specify the URL of the API. You can communicate by using service name only. Now you see greet REST controller. We are sending the request to greet REST controller. We are sending the request to greet REST controller. Greet REST controller is communicating with the Feign client. We are sending the request to greet REST controller. Greet REST controller is talking to Feign client. Feign client is talking to service registry in order to get the service URL based on the name of the service. Based on the name of the service. Are you guys clear with my point? So welcome service name is.
I have a doubt.
Feign client is going to communicate with the service URL in order to communicate. So for that service, it's not one URL. For that service, there are 3 URLs available. So Feign client will get the 3 URLs. Out of these 3 URLs, with which URL it should communicate, that is a confusion for the Feign client. That's why Feign client is going to communicate with the ribbon. Ribbon is going to provide the load balancing mechanism for the Feign client. Ribbon will tell to Feign client, boss, there are 3 URLs available. You do one thing. This request you send to first server. The next request you send to second server. The next request you send to third server. Like this, Ribbon is going to distribute the load to multiple instances of the same application.
Sir, Ribbon automatically it detects. We need to enable.
Yes, whenever the Feign client gets more than one URL from the service registry, immediately Feign client will talk to Ribbon internally. Ribbon will tell the mechanism to distribute the load.
Sir, I'm having also one doubt.
Yes.
Sir, how can Ribbon decide which URL we have to use?
Sorry, can you come again?
Yeah, sir. On basis of which criteria Ribbon decide which?
It is a round robin mechanism. First request go to first server, second request will go to second server, third request will go to third server. That is a round robin mechanism that will be taken care by Ribbon internally. That Ribbon is part of the Feign client.
Hey, hi, sir. I have one question.
Sir, questions I will take at the end of the session, guys. Okay?
Okay, sure. So related to this thing, one is
any question that I'm going to answer at the end of the class.
Okay, sure.
So we are trying to understand what is Feign client and what is inter-service communication and how we are able to implement this load balancing. So I have started my welcome API in multiple instances. So how I have done this load balancing for welcome API. Load balancing for welcome API. What are the changes I have done in order to implement the load balancer for welcome API? The very first step that I have done, I removed port number from welcome API YML file. I don't want to fix the port number. Port number I will supply in the runtime. Port number I will supply in the runtime and make the changes in the REST controller to display port number in the response. So if you see my welcome REST controller, earlier it was sending only message as a response. Now along with the message, it is sending port number also in the response. Okay. So let me take this REST controller. Let me take this REST controller. So these are the changes I have done for this REST controller. So with these changes, it will send the port number also in the response. So in which server this REST API is getting executed and which server processed our request. I'm running this API in 3 servers, nothing but 3 instances. Okay. So I removed port number from the configuration file and I made some changes to the REST controller to send port number in the response. Then next one, how to run this application with the multiple port numbers. Okay. So for that, right click on the application run as run configuration, select the welcome API, go to VM arguments and give the port number and run this application. So with this, one instance is going to run. Then next one, I'm going to run with the another instance 8082 and I'm going to run another instance with the 8083. Okay, so with this, my welcome API is going to run in the 3 servers. So nothing but 3 instances available. It is running in 3 servers and 3 instances available. Okay, so how we are implementing that load balancing? Why we are going for the load balancing? Load balancing is used to run our application in multiple servers and distribute the load to all the servers. If we run application in one server, then burden will be increased on that server. To overcome the burden problems on the server, we are going to implement load balancing. Our application will be deployed in multiple servers. Same application we are deploying in multiple servers, nothing but multiple instances available for the same application so that the requests can be distributed to multiple servers. What are the advantages we have with this approach? Less burden will be there on the server, quick responses to the clients, no single point of failure. So how we have implemented this load balancing? I removed port number from configuration file, remove port number from configuration welcome API YML file, remove server port number, remove that server port number from welcome API YML file, then make the changes in the REST controller to display port number in the to send port number in the response. So what are the changes? I injected environment object and I'm getting server port number. I'm adding that to the response. Okay. Then I'm running this application in 3 instances, guys. How to run this application in the 3 instances? Right click on the application, run as run configuration, and I'm giving the server port number dynamically. So first server, I'm starting with 8081. Second server, I'm starting with 8082. Third server, I'm starting with 8083. Once it is started, then next one, start greet API, start greet service, or else you can check Eureka dashboard. Once it is started, 3 servers are started, check Eureka dashboard and observe 3 instances available for welcome service or not. Okay, so in the Eureka dashboard, very clearly it is going to show you how many instances available for your welcome service. 3 instances are up and running and 3 URLs available. You can see the port number differences also. Then after this is completed, then the next step now, start greet service and send request to greet service, and check inter-service communication. So in the greet service, already we have implemented Feign client. So whenever the request comes to the greet service will communicate with the Feign client. That Feign client is used for service communication. So my requirement is whenever a request comes to the greet API, that greet API should communicate with the welcome API. For this communication in the greet API, I developed Feign client, right? For the Feign client, I am not giving the URL because URLs can change in the future. So that's why I am giving the service name. So Feign client wants to communicate with the welcome API. Welcome API service name is available with the greet API, Feign client. Then what it will do? It will go to the service discovery and it will go to the service discovery and it is going to ask, hey, service discovery, I want to communicate with the welcome API. Can you tell me the URLs of the welcome API? For the welcome API, it's not one URL. For the welcome API, there are 3 URLs available. So out of these 3 URLs, with which URL Feign client should communicate with the welcome API? That's where that Feign client is going to communicate with the ribbon. Ribbon is a internal component for the Feign client. Ribbon is internally working in the Feign client. You no need to do any configuration for the ribbon. It is inbuilt in the Feign client. So Feign client will talk to ribbon. It will tell to ribbon, boss, I have 3 URLs to communicate with the welcome API. You tell me what to do. Then ribbon will tell to the Feign client with which URL it should communicate. So here ribbon will provide a mechanism for distributing the request to multiple servers. What mechanism it is going to follow? It will follow round robin mechanism. So what is the meaning of round robin mechanism? First request will go to first server, second request will go to second server, third request will go to third server. So that is the reason when we are sending the request to the Greet API communicating with the welcome API running in 3 servers. Every time we are getting the response from a different server. So if I don't display this port number in the response, you will not understand load balancing is working or not. Now see, for every request, different port number is coming. That means every request is processing by different server. Welcome API request is processing by different server. So we are able to achieve load balancing for the welcome service. So Greet API communicating with the welcome service running in 3 instances. So Greet API having a Feign client. Through Feign client, it is communicating with the welcome API, and Feign client communicating with the different server every time by using ribbon. So this is all about load balancing in the microservices. So this is about load balancing of microservices. Are you guys clear?
Sir, you cleared the port number from property file. So environment.get property, it's picking from it will pick null, right?
No, sir. Environment.get property, whatever the port number it is running, server port number, I am supplying that server port number in the runtime.
Okay.
Instead of passing from the YML file, I am setting the port number in the runtime as a runtime argument and I am sending. So once the server is started, so in which server it is running, that server port number it will pick up. First server running on 8081, second server 8082, third server 808. It will take the port number in the runtime from the server in which this application is running. So that is the reason every time in the response you can see a different port number.
Okay.
That is a proof to say that every request is going to different server. Load balancing.
Sir, I have a small doubt here.
Yes, tell me.
Sir, is it possible to use load balancing concept through REST template or web client? Because sir, if it was sir.
No, sir. This kind of load balancing we can't use with REST template or web client because if you go with the REST template, you need to give the direct URL with which URL you want to communicate.
Sir, but it's not possible, right? So, but in the Feign client, we are going to give the service name, right? If you want to
use REST template or web client, then load balancer should be available at the server side. Currently, load balancing happening at the client side. If you want to use REST template, then this kind of load balancing, all these servers should be configured with one load balancer. This load balancer we can take in the AWS cloud. Then REST template can send the request to the load balancer of AWS. So that is server side load balancing. Currently, whatever we implemented, that is a client side load balancing. Feign client only deciding to which server it has to send the request. Server having 3 URLs. So which URL it should use for communication, that is decided by the Feign client. This is client side load balancing. Suppose if you don't have the Feign client concept and all, how to implement load balancing? Then you need to go for server side load balancing. You need to go to AWS cloud. There you need to create a load balancer. All the servers should be added to that load balancer. Then you will send the request to the load balancer URL. Then load balancer URL will distribute the request to all the servers. Client side load balancing will be available. Server side load balancing will be available. If you want to implement server side load balancing, you need to use cloud. AWS will provide, Azure will provide the load balancer. Currently, we are not using cloud. So that's why we are going for client side load balancing. Client side load balancing means client only will decide with which server it should communicate. That is the difference.
Welcome service running in different port number, but they actually uses only one Tomcat server or not?
3 different Tomcat servers, sir.
Okay, sir. Means number of port numbers when we define at the runtime, then multiple same server is running Tomcat.
So first time it will run in one Tomcat server, first server. When you run second time, second Tomcat server will start. When you run third time, third Tomcat. These are embedded Tomcat servers, right? For every instance, separate server. 3 servers are running for the same application with 3 different port numbers.
Sir, if we do not provide any port number at runtime, then what will be taken by JVM?
8080 default port number.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Sir, we have configured only one Tomcat server. Within the Tomcat server, 3 port number you have been configured.
Yeah, we have not configured one Tomcat, sir. It is an embedded server. When you run a Spring Boot application, it will start the Tomcat server automatically. So we started application 3 times, means 3 Tomcat servers are started. Every Tomcat server using different port number. It's not one Tomcat.
IP address is different.
3 Tomcats.
Only here we have configured IP addresses, not the server names. If you deployed in the AWS, how we configure here?
If you deploy in the AWS, same processor, your services will be available in the AWS. Means in the AWS, one Linux machine we are going to take and we will deploy in the Linux machine. That's it. Here we are running in the Windows machine. So in the real time, we will run these things in the Linux machine.
Okay, sir. Then here VM scientist work only for the 2 projects within the same server only.
Correct, sir. So if you are having microservices with the same service discovery, if these two APIs are registered with the same Eureka server, that's why we are able to achieve this inter-service communication with the service name. If these 2 APIs are not in the same service registry, then you need to use the service URL for the communication.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Instead of doing the load balancing in microservices in multiple Tomcat, if we are going to do the load balancing in AWS with multiple EC2 instances, so which one would be better? Actually, that is the.
Sir, it depends on your scenario, sir. Whether you want to go with, if you are using cloud platform in your project, then server-side load balancing is better. If a cloud platform is not there for your project, then client-side load balancing is better. It depends on your project scenario. Whether you want to go with server-side load balancing or client-side load balancing. If your project is using cloud, then go with server-side load balancing. If your project is not using cloud, then go with client-side load balancing.
Okay. So what will be the scenario in single EC2 instance? We will deploy multiple Tomcats.
Yes, sir.
Or multiple EC2 instance we will have.
Correct, correct. So what type of load balancing we implemented today, guys? Is it server-side load balancing or is it client-side load balancing?
Client-side
Load balancing. Why we are calling this as a client-side load balancing?
Because you're going to validate in the client side only.
Yes, it is deciding at the client side with which URL it has to communicate. If you go for server-side load balancing, it will decide at the server which type of which server we have to connect. For establishing server-side load balancing, AWS cloud concept, AWS load balancer we have to set up.
Sir, a small confusion, sir. So as per my project specific, so in my project, sir, we are using a REST template, so we can't able to configure this Feign client, sir.
Are you using service registry?
Yes, sir.
Then you can replace that REST template with Feign client.
Okay, so
in that service registry, you can replace that REST template with the Feign client.
So in all the places we need to change the URL, right, sir?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Fine, guys. So with this, we understood what is load balancing and load balancing, implement load balancer for welcome API. In the document, I'm giving everything clearly. So what are the changes you need to do in the REST API and how you will run that API in the multiple servers. Okay. So here you need to remember, as we are running this API for 3 times, it will run in 3 different servers with different port numbers, guys. So with this, our API will run in 3 servers with 3 different port numbers. It's not one Tomcat server, guys. So when you execute this, one Tomcat will start. That is embedded Tomcat server with the port number 8081. And when you do this, it will start another Tomcat server with port number 8082. When you do this, it will start another Tomcat server with 8083. That means 3 instances are running for the same API. same application will run in 3 servers. Why we are running same application in 3 servers, guys? Why we are running same application in 3 servers?
For load balancing.
For load balance.
High availability and high availability.
Yes. In order to implement the load balance. Okay.
Sir, where we configure the ribbon configuration? Sir?
We don't do that, sir. It is internal. It is inbuilt.
Yes, sir. It's internal. Yeah.
It is taken care by Feign client. We are not configuring ribbon anywhere. It is inbuilt.
Sir, if there is any scenario where both will be implemented, sir, client side and server side?
So only one we are going to use.
Only one, sir. Sir, sometimes there are distributed data centers, right, sir? Some place one data center, other place other data center. Can we
server
use
side load balancer concept will come into picture, sir.
Okay, sir. Okay.
So in the client side, is the ribbon is the only one, or is there any other alternative?
No, sir. Ribbon in the Feign client only ribbon is available.
We have multiple flavors of other than round robin. We have different type flavors also, right?
Yes, sir. Sticky session is available. IP hashing is available. So all those things will be configured using that server side load balancing mechanism. Okay. Which request should go to which server, that can be configured with the load. Those are called load balancer algorithms.
When we have multiple data centers, then we use that, right?
Yes, we will use that.
Ashok sir, like in a real-time scenario, or do we follow the same approach, or there is some another approach?
Right. I told you, if your project having cloud infrastructure, then better to go with the server side. If your project don't have the cloud, got my point? Yes, perfect. Now, next one. So with this, we understood how to set up our microservice application with the inter-service communication using Feign client and by using load balancing also. Our service registry is running on the port number 8761. Our admin server is running on the port number 1111. Zipkin server is running on the port number 9411. Okay. Then our greet API is running in the 9091. Our welcome API is running with the 8081 series. So welcome API, instead of running in one server, I'm running the welcome API in 3 servers. Nothing but 3 instances I'm running for the welcome API. So when we have 3 instances, load balancing we can achieve. The load can be distributed to all the instances in the round robin fashion. All the instances in the round robin fashion. Okay, guys. Now, so Feign client we are using for inter-service communication. The benefit of using this Feign client can communicate with the APIs by using API name, not with the API URL. So greet API using Feign client, and it is configured with welcome service name. So Feign client will talk to service registry, will get the service URL. So that service is having more than one URL. So it will communicate with that by using ribbon. Ribbon will help to the Feign client to identify which load balancing algorithm it should follow. So by default, it is going to follow round robin algorithm. First request will go to first server. Second request will go to second server. Many people are getting confused. So the welcome service running in 3 instances. That means how many servers are running? 3 servers are running. Every instance means one application which is running in one embedded Tomcat container. So here for the welcome service, 3 Tomcat containers are running with 3 different port numbers. Okay, good. Next one, that is API gateway in the microservices. So we already discussed it theoretically. What is the purpose of API gateway in the microservices? API gateway is going to act as a entry point for all the backend APIs in our application. This API gateway is going to act as a mediator between front-end application and back-end applications. API gateway will act as a mediator between front-end application and back-end application. Mainly, we are going to write filters and routings in the API gateway. So as we see in our diagram, so back-end microservices are available and front-end UI application will be available. So directly, we don't share the URLs of the back-end microservices because in the back-end, 20, 30, 40 microservices can be available. We don't give all these microservices URLs to the UI application. For the UI application, we will give API gateway. So any request that is coming to our application should go to API gateway. API gateway will verify that request is valid or not. If the request is valid, then only API gateway will forward that request. Otherwise, API gateway will stop that request. Okay, so now how to set up API gateway for our application? As of now, what we are doing, I'm directly sending the request to greet API. I'm directly sending the request to welcome API. We should not do this. We should not give our API URLs directly. Always the backend microservices should be accessed through API gateway only. So what is the API gateway in the microservices? It is the entry point for all the backend APIs. It is going to act as a mediator between front-end application and backend applications. What we will do in the API gateway? In the API gateway, we are going to implement filters and routings concept. Filter is used to validate that request is valid or not, and routing is used to forward the request to particular microservice. So how we are going to work with the API gateway? Working with a Spring Cloud API gateway. Working with the Spring Cloud API gateway application. Okay, good. Now, first step, you create one Spring Boot application with the below dependencies, guys. In order to work with the API gateway, create one Spring Boot application with the below dependencies. Eureka client dependency, cloud gateway dependency, DevTools dependency we are going to create. And the next one, configure enable discovery client annotation. So whatever the API gateway we are developing, that API gateway is acting as a client for the Eureka server. Whatever the API gateway that we are trying to develop, that API gateway will act as a client for the Eureka server. So that is the reason we are configuring enable discovery client annotation in the start class. So to create API gateway, Eureka client dependency, cloud gateway dependency. This is the new dependency we are going to add in our application, and we are going to configure discovery client. And the next one, configure routings in the API gateway. That means which request should go to which API, greet API available, welcome API available. So from the UI, the request will come to API gateway. So which request should go to greet API, which request should go to welcome API, those routings we are going to configure in the API gateway. Those routings we are going to configure in the API gateway. Then if you want, you can create a filter also in the API gateway in order to verify that request is valid or not. You can create a filter. Create filter to validate incoming request. Create filter to validate incoming request. So that request is valid or not, we can verify that by using a filter concept. You can verify that by using filter concept. Now I will show you normal filter. In the Spring Security, JWT filters we are going to create. JWT token we are going to validate by using filter. Okay, good guys. Now let me start API gateway project creation. So I'm going to create a 6th application, file, new, Spring Starter project. File, new, Spring Starter project. 06 API gateway project I am creating. 06 API gateway I am creating. Click on next. Dependencies, discovery client, DevTools, cloud gateway. New dependency we are adding first time. In order to represent this application as a gateway application, okay, so I'm using gateway dependency. Cloud gateway dependency. Yes. So we are taking the gateway, provides a simple, effective way to route the APIs in the server-based applications with cross-cutting logics. Reactive API gateway is available. and a normal API gateway is available. So let me select this reactive gateway or normal gateway. Okay, anything is fine. Next and finish. So with this, I created my API gateway project. So I will represent this API gateway as a Eureka client, guys. Gateway project is getting created. Gateway project is getting created. So let me configure this as a discovery client application.java. So to configure this as a discovery client, we are going to use one annotation, that is enable discovery client. We are going to use one annotation that is called discovery client. Yes, let us write this. Enable discovery client annotation. And coming to the properties file, I'm converting this properties file to YML file. Okay, so API gateway, this is the name of the service I am taking, and port number I am configuring server port number. API gateway should run on the port number. Server port I'm configuring as something like 3333. API gateway port number I'm configuring as 3333. That is good. Now we need to configure routings here, guys. So which request should go to which URL we need to configure. Think 1 minute. And the API gateway, the dependency it is coming as MVC dependency. I think it is wrong. Reactive gateway we need to select. Okay, cloud starter gateway, not this MVC gateway. We should not use this MVC. At the time of creating the project, select reactive gateway, guys. Okay, so cloud reactive gateway. You need to select the dependency as reactive gateway and a DevTools dependency available. Yes, now, so if you observe, cloud starter gateway dependency available, Netflix Eureka client dependency available, DevTools dependency available. Perfect. So I'm able to create my API gateway application, and I'm configuring this application as a Eureka client by using enable discovery client annotation. And I configured routings in the YML file. What routings? Which request should go to which service? I need to configure the routings. Observe very carefully how we are going to configure routings. So to configure routings, so what I am going to tell to the API gateway. If any request comes with the /welcome, then send that request to welcome API. If any request comes with the greet, then send that request to greet API. So what I am going to tell to the routings in the API gateway. If request comes with the /welcome, then you send that request to welcome service. If any request comes with the /greet, then you send that request to greet service. So that is the routing we are going to update. So high level. So any request which is coming to our application, the request will come to the API gateway. What I will tell to the API gateway, boss, you need to do the routing. If the request URL is /welcome, then you send that request to welcome service. If the request URL is /greet, then you send that request to greet service. So that is the routing we need to do in the API gateway, because API gateway is a mediator between front-end application and back-end microservices. And the API gateway is the entry point for all the back-end microservices. Now, how we are going to configure the routings? Observe carefully. Spring dot cloud dot gateway routes. Cloud dot gateway dot routes. Spring dot cloud dot gateway dot routes we need to configure. Okay, gateway routes. So what are the routes? First ID. So this is my first API. So I'm going to specify my welcome API. So when the request should go to welcome API, this is the URI load balancing welcome service. Name of the service I am going to specify. When the request should go to this service. So let me configure some predicates. I'm going to configure the predicates. So in the predicates, I'm going to specify what is the path. I'm going to specify what is the path. That path is equal to /welcome. So this is my configuration. So what this configuration is going to represent, guys? Whenever a request comes with /welcome, I want to send that request to welcome service. I'm telling load balancer of the welcome. LB : nothing but load balancer of the welcome. Here ID, you can say API 1. Okay. Similarly, I'm going to configure another ID. Which is API 2. For this, I'm going to specify the URI, that is the load balancer /greet service. And for this, predicates represents the rules. When that request should go to which API, if the request path is equal to /greet. If the request path is equal to /greet, it should go to greet service. If the URL pattern is /greet, go to greet service, load balancer of greet service. Greet service can have more than one URL also. So whenever you configure the cloud gateway, internally cloud gateway also will use a ribbon for doing the load balancing. It will use a ribbon concept, right? So what is the meaning of this? In my application, there are two microservices available, API 1 and API 2. So whenever a request comes to the API gateway with the URL as a /welcome, you route the request to welcome service. /welcome URL pattern belongs to welcome service. /greet URL pattern belongs to greet service. So that is the meaning of this configuration. You observe the configuration that we are doing in the API gateway. Guys, observe the configuration that we are doing in the API gateway. Whenever a request comes to the API gateway, if the URL is /welcome, I am telling to API gateway to forward that request to welcome service. If any request comes with URL as a /greet, I am telling to forward that request to greet service. So what is this LB colon? LB colon means I am telling to API gateway to forward the request based on the name of the service, not with the URL, because welcome service can have multiple URLs, greet service can have multiple URLs in the real time. So one service can have multiple URLs. That's why I am telling to forward the request with the load balancing mechanism. Internally, API gateway also will use a ribbon, because whenever a request comes with the /welcome, welcome service having 3 URLs. So to which URL it has to send the request, internally the ribbon load balancing mechanism will work in the API gateway also. So in the API gateway, these kind of routings we are going to configure. So what are the routings here? If a request comes with the /welcome, send that request to welcome service. If a request comes with the /greet, send that request to greet service. So this is the name of the API gateway and this is the port number of the API gateway. Are you guys able to understand how to create API gateway now? Are you guys clear with this one? How to create API gateway? Working with the Spring Cloud API gateway. Eureka client, we are adding as one dependency because I want to register this application with the Eureka client and I want to configure the gateway. So that's why I'm configuring Cloud Reactive Gateway dependency and I'm configuring DevTools. So how to represent this application as a Eureka client? By using enable discovery client annotation, we are configuring this. Then configure routings. So which request should go to which microservice in the backend, that we are configuring in the API gateway routings YML file. What routings I configured? If request comes with /greet, forward that request to greet service. If a request comes with /welcome, forward that request to welcome service. Here I am giving URL LB. LB means load balancer. These services can have multiple URLs. Ribbon will be used in the API gateway to identify which request should go to which URL. Which request should go to which URL, that we can specify. Along with this, if you want to implement a filter for your application, you can create the filters also in the API gateway. So let me create one class as a filter in ashokit.filter. So I'm creating my filter. You can create filter according to your requirement. So my filter I'm creating. So this filter I am making as a global filter. Implements one interface called global filter. Yes, to represent this as a string bean, I'm using one annotation called @component annotation. So when we are implementing global filter, we need to override a method called filter method. So how do you want to validate that request? So if you are having OAuth tokens, JWT tokens, then you can validate that request. You can validate that request by using this filter. So inside this, just I will show you whether this filter is getting executed or not. System.out.println, I'm going to say a message, filter is executed. I will just show you the message whether this filter is getting executed or not. If the filter is getting executed, then what logic we can do? We can validate request. We can validate the request. If the request is valid, then only we'll proceed. Chain.filter, I'm going to pass that exchange object. So if you do this, the request will be forwarded. Otherwise, the request will be failed. Now I will show you how to validate that request also by using this API gateway. This is pending. How to validate the request, that is pending. First, let us verify really this filter is getting executed or not, and the routing is working or not. If this filter is executed, then I will implement the logic to validate that request. Okay, good. Now let me start our API gateway project, guys. Let me do the Maven update. Maven, update this project. API gateway is ready. Now you no need to send the request to greet API, welcome API directly. We will send the request to API gateway. API gateway will run on the port number 3333. API gateway will forward the request to backend microservices. In the API gateway, filter also available, but currently there is no logic available in the filter. I will implement this logic also to validate that the filter is working as expected or not. Okay, good. Let me run API gateway application, run as boot application. Go to Eureka server and check it. API gateway is registered with our Eureka or not. Check this. API gateway is registered with Eureka or not. Come on. Yes. Now you can see API gateway is registered with the Eureka. API gateway running on which port number, guys? API gateway is running on the port number 3333. Now, I want to access Greet API. I need to send the request to Greet API directly, or I need to send the request to API gateway, guys. My API gateway is running, which is entry point for all the backend microservices in our application. So I need to send the request to the Greet API directly, or I need to send the request to the API gateway. Come on. I need to send the request to the API gateway, or I need to send the request to the Greet API directly. API gateway. Which port number it is using? API gateway running on which port number? API gateway running on which port number? API gateway running on which port number, guys? 3333. Now can you tell me how to access this API gateway application now? I want to access Greet API. I want to access Greet API. How to access it? What is the URL to access Greet API now? Yes, localhost colon 3333/Greet. 3333 port number belongs to which application in our microservices now? Which application running on the port number 3333? API gateway running on the port number 3333. I'm sending a request with /greet. What is the meaning of that? So request will go to API gateway 3333 port number, URL greet, then forward the request to greet service. Greet service having a Feign client. It will communicate with the welcome service. Load balancing also will work. Now send the request to the greet URL and check the console. The filter is working or not. And check the console. The filter is working or not. Open the API gateway console. Clear the API gateway console. Now let us see filter is working or not. Send the request. I'm sending the request. Yes. Am I able to get the response from the Greet API? I am sending the request to API gateway and I'm getting the response from the Greet API. Can I say my routing is working now? Guys, can we say my routings are working? Whatever the routing I configured in the API gateway, is that routing working as expected or not? I'm sending the request to the API gateway. I'm getting the response from the Greet API. Go to here, check the console of the API gateway. The filter is working or not. Filter is also executed. Filter is working. API gateway also working. Routings also working. Now, anybody able to send a request to the API gateway 3333 greeter 3333 welcome also working. Load balancing working for the welcome API. So 3333/welcome. First request processed by first server. Second request processed by second server. Third request processed by third server. So this is also working. This is also working. So now with this, we are able to say that routings are working. With this, we are able to say that routings are working. Now, filter is also working. For every request, my filter is executing. Can we validate the request? Can we validate the request by using filter? If the request is valid, then only I will process. Otherwise, I will stop the request. If the request is valid, then only I will process the request. Otherwise, I will not process the request. So you can, because implementing the security for all the microservices not recommended. So security is common for all the microservices. So will you implement security for every microservice in the application, or security will be available at only one place in the application? Request validation. So will you write the logic to validate the request in every microservice, or we will write the logic to validate the request in the API gateway? Come on, guys. Will you write that logic in every microservice, or you will write that logic in the API gateway? We will write that logic in the API gateway. So what is the request validation I will do? What is the request validation I will do? So if request contains secret token, if request contains secret token, so if request contains below header, then it is valid request. What I will do, header key, I will keep secret is equal to Ashok IT @123. So when anybody sending a request to my API gateway, so if it is my client application will send one request header. Header key is secret. Header value is Ashok IT @123. If the request contains below header, then it is valid request. So process it. Header secret is equal to Ashok IT @123. If header is not present, if above header is not present, then it is invalid request. Don't process it. So this is not from our client. If the request is coming from our client, then this header will be available in the request. If this header is coming in the request, then only it is valid request, then process that request. If the request does not contain this header, that means it is invalid request, then don't process that request. Create a filter to validate incoming request. If request contains below header, that means it is valid. If above header is not present, that means it is invalid request. So this request validation, instead of doing this request validation in every microservice, we can do that in the API gateway. API gateway is the entry point for our application. So API gateway filters will be available, routings will be available. Filter is working. For every request, the filter is working, routing also working. The request is able to forward to the particular microservice. Now, I want to validate that request by using this condition. Are you clear with my condition to validate the request? Are you guys clear with my condition to validate the request, guys? If request contains the header, key is secret, value is Ashok IT @123, then only it is valid request, I will process it. If the request does not contain the header, if a header value is not matching, then it is an invalid request. I will throw the exception. I will not process invalid request. Are you able to follow me? What kind of logic we will do in the filter? Filter is used to pre-process. Filter is used to pre-process the request. Okay. So currently, this is basic request validation. Advanced request validation, JWT token. In the Spring Security, JWT token we are going to learn. So in that JWT Spring Security topic, I will explain about the JWT token, how to validate the token by using filter. We will discuss in the upcoming classes. Are you clear? Yeah, this is just for our understanding. Secret token I am just using for our understanding purpose, how to validate. In the real time, token will not be available like this. In the real time, JWT tokens will be used. So today, I'm using hard-coded token for your knowledge, how to validate the request, just for our idea purpose. This is not the best practice. In the real time, JWT token will be used to validate the request. Today concept not about the token. Today concept how to validate, how to work with the filter. You got the clarity? Guys, come on. Yes. So how to check that request is having that header or not? So to check that request is having the header or not, we are going to first take the request from this exchange object. Exchange is one object for the filter method, right? Exchange dot get request. I'm getting that request object, which is servlet HTTP request will be available. Server HTTP request we got. Then request dot get headers. What are the headers coming in the request? HTTP headers I'm accessing. Then from this HTTP headers, I'm going to get the keys. Headers dot key set. All the keys I am getting from the headers. Now, in that keys, my secret token is available or not, I will verify. If key set dot contains secret, that means the header is present. Suppose if that keys, whatever the request is coming, in that request, what are the headers coming? In those headers, what are the header keys available? So those keys contains my key called secret or not. If key set does not contain this token, this header, then I will throw new runtime exception. Throw new runtime exception saying that it is invalid request. Throw runtime exception, I will say that it is invalid request. Okay. Suppose if the token is available, token value is matching or not. So token header should be secret, value should be Ashok IT @123. First of all, so whatever the request is coming, I'm taking that request by using this exchange object, exchange.getRequest. I got the request object. From that request, I'm getting all the headers from the request I'm receiving. Headers.keyset. What are the keys available in the header? I'm getting all the keys. In that keys, secret key is available or not? I am validating. Okay. Key set dot contains of secret. I'm validating. If the key does not available in the header, then it is a invalid request. Suppose if the key is available, let me check its value. Headers dot get of key. I want to get its value now. How to get it? Headers dot get of my key. My key is secret. Let me get the value of this. List of values we are going to get. List of get. I'm going to see if list dot get of 0, which is not equals to Ashok IT @123. Fixed value I am using now for our understanding. If this list of values does not contain this value, then this is a invalid request for me. I will not process. I will throw the exception. So if the header contains secret and if secret contains the value as Ashok IT @123, then only that is a valid request. Then only I will process. Otherwise, I will not process this request. So this is very basic filter implementation, guys. So in the real time, this will not be hard coded like this. In the real time, token will be dynamic. JWT tokens will be used in the real time. So in the upcoming classes, we will see how to work with the JWT token and how to validate that token. Currently, I am taking hard coded token just for filter implementation part. Are you clear with my filter logic? What is the purpose of a filter in the API gateway? What is the purpose of the filter in the API gateway? What is the purpose of the filter in API gateway? What is the purpose of a filter in the API gateway? To perform pre-processing, to validate the request. How I am validating the request here? I'm getting the request object. From the request, I'm getting the headers. From the headers, I'm getting all the keys. Okay, keys I am checking. Is there any key with a name called secret? If this key not available in the header, I will not process the request. I will say invalid request. And if that key present, what is the value of that key? If that value is Ashok IT @123, then only I will process. Otherwise, I will throw the exception. Okay. If these two conditions, first condition to check if secret header is available or not. Second condition that the header value is Ashok IT @123 or not. I'm going to check this now. So now let us verify. Now can I access my application from the browser now? Is it possible to access our application from the browser directly? Can you access application from the browser? API gateway. Send the request. What is saying, guys? 500 error. Why it is failing now? So user able to access our application or user is not able to access our application? User is able to access our application. User is not able to access our application. Not able to access our application. Why user is not able to access our application now? Why user is not able to access our application? Header is not available. So application is expecting a header. Client is not sending the header. That's why it is failing. So now how to send the request along with the header? How to send the request along with the header now? Postman. Okay. Go to Postman and let us send the request to the API gateway. To access our microservices, we need to send the request to the API gateway along with the header. If a header is present, if a header is valid, then only our request will be processed. Otherwise, our request will not be processed. Now, so let me go to this one. Get request I want to send to the application. So which is http://localhost:/3333/greet. 3333 is the port number of which application, guys? So which microservice running on the port number 3333 in our project? Which microservice running on the port number 3333? API gateway. So I'm not sending any header. Click on send request. When I send the request, what is happening, guys? Request is processed or the request is failed? Request is processed or request is failed? Request is failed. Why the request is failed? Header is not present. Okay, 500 error, header is not present. Now send the header in the request. The header key, which is secret, I'm using that key. For that, headers key is a secret. Its value Ashok IT @123. Now I'm sending a header. Key is secret. Value is Ashok IT @123. Send the request. Now, when I send that request, am I able to get the successful response? 200. If I'm sending a request along with the valid header, am I able to get the successful response from the API? So with this, can we say filter is working, routing also working in the API gateway? Filter is working, routing also working in our API gateway. If I send the request without this header, I removed this header, delete this header. Okay, I deleted the header, send that request. Now it is failing. 500 internal server error. So now our application is a secure, basic security, very basic security. If the token is coming in the request header, then only API gateway will validate that request. Otherwise, API gateway will not process your request. So what is the role of the API gateway in our application? API gateway is acting as a entry point for all the microservices. So what logic is available in the API gateway? In the API gateway, filters logic is available and routings logic is also available. In the API gateway, filters logic is available, routings logic is also available. Are you clear with my point? How to implement filters and how to implement routings in our API gateway. So this is the filter I have implemented. I will give you filter logic. Anyhow, this code I will push to GitHub repository. You can access it. Yes, so we are able to complete API gateway project also. We are able to complete API gateway also. Then what is pending in our diagram? Config server is pending. What is pending in our diagram? Config server is pending. Okay. So in the tomorrow session, tomorrow morning 7 o'clock, we are going to understand what is a config server and how to work with the config server. Or else today I will record one video for the config server and I will update that. Or else if I get time today, I will upload that config server video. Or else tomorrow the regular 7 o'clock class will be available. In the 7 o'clock class, we are going to work on the config server. Okay, as part of this microservices free workshop, so we are going to cover Kafka and Redis, not part of the workshop, guys. So admin server, Zipkin server, config server, service registry, API gateway, these things I told that I will cover. So tomorrow I will work on config server. Good. Yes, I hope you got the clarity. On today, we implemented two concepts in our project. What are those two concepts we implemented? Today we implemented load balancing. Today we implemented load balancing and we implemented API gateway in our application. I will upload these notes and the video also in the YouTube. So you will access them in our WhatsApp channel. So already last two videos I have uploaded. This video also I will upload in the YouTube channel and you can access them. Class notes and workspace I will upload. Okay. Perfect, guys. So tomorrow is the last session. Tomorrow we are going to work on config server concept. Yeah, all of you have that WhatsApp channel link where you are going to get the class notes and the class video. All of you have that WhatsApp channel link where you are going to get the class notes and the class video. Yes, I have already given that WhatsApp channel link. If anybody is not part of that, please join.